We were talking of events which cannot be explained by natural causes. At Dabney's last evening, most of us had given an instance without producing much effect. Among the strangers was a little man with an anxious face. He watched each speaker with the closest attention, but said nothing. Then Dabney, wishing to include him in the talk, turned to him and asked if he had no experience or story to be narrated or explained. He thought a moment. "Well," he said, "not a story in the ordinary sense of the word. Nothing like most of your examples. Truth, I always believe, is not only stranger than fiction, but also greatly more interesting. I could tell you an occurrence which happened to me personally, and which, strangely enough, completed itself only this afternoon." We begged him to begin. "A year or two ago, I took a room in an old house in the Great Ormond Street. The bedroom walls had been painted by the previous tenant, but the place was damp, and there were great patches on the walls. One of these was exactly like a face. One morning, I came to think of it as real, as my fellow lodger. In fact, while other patches on the wall grew larger and changed shapes, this never did. While there, I fell ill with influenza, and all day long I had nothing to do but read or think. It was then that the face began to get a firmer hold of me. It grew more and more real and remarkable. There was a curious curve of the nose, and the forehead was remarkable. In fact, the face of an uncommon man, a man in 1,000. Well, I got better, but the face still controlled me. I found myself searching the streets for one like it. Somewhere, I was convinced, the real man must exist. I only knew that he and I were in some way linked by fate. In vain, I often went to places where people gathered in large numbers. Political meetings, football matches, and railway stations. The search became madness with me. I stood at busy corners watching the crowd until people thought me mad, and the police began to know me and be suspicious. I never looked at women, men, 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 all the time. I, at last, saw him. He was in a taxi, driving east along Piccadilly. I saw an empty taxi coming. "Follow that taxi," I said, and leaped in. The driver managed to keep it in sight and took us to Charing Cross. I rushed onto the platform and found my man with 2 ladies and a little girl. They were going to France. I stayed there, trying to get a word with him, but in vain. They moved to the train in one group along with other friends. I hastily purchased a ticket to Folkestone, hoping to catch him on the boat before it sailed, but at Folkestone he got on the ship before me with his friends, and they disappeared into a large private cabin. Again I was defeated, but I was determined to go with him. I had only just enough for a single fare to Boulogne, but nothing could stop me now. I took up my position opposite his cabin door and waited. After half an hour, the door opened, and he came out with a little girl. My heart beat fast. There was no mistaking the face. Every line was the same. He looked at me and moved towards the way to the upper deck. It was now or never, I felt. "Excuse me," I stammered, "but do you mind giving me your card? I have a very important reason in asking it." He seemed greatly surprised, but he granted my request. Handing me his card, he hurried on with the girl. It was clear that he thought me mad and decided to please me. Holding the card tight in my hand, I hurried to a lonely corner of the ship and read. On it were the words, "Mr. Ormond Wall," with an address at Pittsburgh, USA. I remember no more until I found myself in a hospital at Boulogne. There I lay in a broken condition for some weeks. He was silent. I went back, he started once again, and after a moment or so, to Great Ormond Street to find out all I could about this American. And so the time went on until yesterday morning. I had slept till late. When I woke up, the room was bright with sunlight. I looked at once at the wall on which the face is to be seen. I rubbed my eyes and sprang up. It was only faintly visible. Last night it had been clear as ever. I could almost hear it speak. And now it was a ghost of itself. Confused and sad, I went out. The early editions of the papers were already out. I saw the headline, American Millionaire's Motor Accident. It read, Mr. Ormond Wall, the Pittsburgh millionaire, and party, motoring in Italy, were hit by a wagon, and the car overturned. Mr. Wall's condition was critical. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, looking with unseeing eyes at the face on the wall. And even as I looked, suddenly it completely disappeared. Later, I found that Mr. Wall died of his injuries at what I take it to be that very moment. Again, he was silent. Most remarkable, we said. Most extraordinary. We meant it too. Yes, said the stranger. There are three most remarkable things about my story. One is that it should be possible for a patch on the wall of a house in London not only to form the features of a gentleman in America, but also to have a close association with his life. Another one is that the gentleman's name should bear any relation to the spot on which his features were being so curiously reproduced by some unknown agency. Is it not so? We agreed with him, and our original discussion on supernatural occurrences continued with great excitement. Then he rose up and said good night. Just as he was at the door, one of the company asked him what he considered the third most exciting thing in connection with his interesting story. Oh, the third thing, he said as he opened the door. I was forgetting that. The third extraordinary thing about the story is that I made it up about half an hour ago. Good night again.